you miss me? I've been out of it comatose, but the depression is over.
Hello and welcome to Controlled Burns, the hobby list podcast from me, your host, Andrew Burns, or Slow Burn from Wildfire Gaming. Really last week we finished the main thrust of A Tale of Blood and Sweatsocks by Mick Foley, our audiobook experiment, seven-parter. But now going into part 8 here, which is should just be a shorter episode because it's really just a bonus chapter that was not originally in the book, the original print of the book, but I guess the version that I bought back in the day was from 2000 instead of 1999, so it did include a little bit of postscript here. And it's not maybe we'll see how necessary it is. I mean, I read it once a long time ago. I don't really remember that much of what he gets into here, but obviously it's going to be more of what he did in, I guess, 1999, because that's where we left off. I think he wins the title. Yeah, right at the beginning of 1999. So we're gonna go into kind of what happened after that, even though it's not as perfect a bow of an ending probably as what we heard last time, the original end of the book. I mean, it's here, we have it, and I really, really enjoyed reading through the book as we have here on the podcast. It has become one of my favorite books that I've ever read. My wife Reagan and I have been reading a lot of great books lately, specifically the Song of Ice and Fire series. She has me going through the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes as part of the Hunger Games um, series. And have read plenty of other books. But wow, I really love this. Certainly when it comes to um, just like a autobiography. I can't think of one that I've read that I like better. So it's been a really great experience, and we're just going to put a bow on it here. Truly for the final time, um, a chapter here, the bonus chapter from A Tale of Blood and Sweatsocks by Mick Foley. February 24th, 9 a.m. Almost 8 months have passed since I last put down my pen for Have a Nice Day. But in some ways, it seems like a lifetime. I certainly feel like I have more pressure on me this time around. When I began this book on May 12th, 1999, in Tallahassee, Florida, I had no idea what I was going to write about. I just knew that if I let my assigned ghostwriter continue on his literary path of destruction, I would be one depressed SOB when publishing time came around. I'd often visualized my life as a book, but unfortunately, my visualization didn't coincide with that of my writers. I quite frankly would have been embarrassed if it had been published. Granted, quality or lack thereof is not always of utmost importance in the book world, but I really didn't feel comfortable letting a man who barely knew me write my life story. I called the World Wrestling Federation offices on that fateful day of May 12th to tell them that the writer wasn't going to work out. Hell, we'll just get you another writer, Mick, said gruff but lovable Jim Bell, the World Wrestling Federation head of licensing and merchandising. Well, Jim, I responded, knowing that my next statement was going to seem somewhat akin to suggesting to Vince McMahon that he'd throw Al Snow in the main event of WrestleMania. I was kind of thinking I could write it myself. Now let's take a test and see if you can gauge Mr. Bell's reaction. My proposal was met with A, great enthusiasm, B, endless accolades about the guts, pride, and determination it would take to tackle such a bold endeavor, C, concern that maybe 15 years of shots to the head might make writing a book somewhat difficult, or D, a long period of awkward silence. After about 30 seconds, I decided to break the silence. I'll tell you what, Jim, how about I write a chapter and send it to you? If you like it, I'll continue, and if you don't, we'll find another writer. I sat there in that arena for several hours. I had arrived at the building very early and proceeded to hammer out the touching account of losing my ear in Germany. After that, I continued writing, knowing that it would be harder for Jim to put the kibosh on it if more work had gone into it. 2 days later, I overnighted about 70 handwritten notebook pages to Jim's office and waited anxiously for some feedback. We like it, we're going to go with it, came his gruff but lovable reply, and I was off to the races, literally, due to the fact that I only had 50 days to turn in a 6,000 word book. In the hands of a professional writer, this would have been challenging but feasible. Organizational skills combined with notes and a knowledge of pacing a story would have resulted in a dutifully crafted 6,000 word book. Much to the chagrin, for the record, I've never used that word before, of Judith Reagan, the namesake of Reagan Books. She wasn't dealing with a professional writer, but a professional wrestler, and I didn't have any organizational skills, notes, or knowledge of pacing a story. As a result, the July 1st deadline was met, not with a dutifully crafted 6,000 word book, but 760 handwritten pages of notebook paper that checked in somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000 words. That's same near Tom Clancy's neighborhood. I was proud of my effort. The parts I had read out loud to the wrestlers had been met with great encouragement and laughter. Some parts I had let people read privately had made them cry. Sure, it was long, but I felt like I had a lot to say. Meanwhile, in New York City, when Judith Reagan finally received the massive manuscript in type form, she must have been surprised by its size. Read this, she told my editor, Jeremy Ruby Strauss, and we'll have to talk about cutting it. I really felt like I was going to be sick when I received the first of what would turn out to be many phone calls from Jeremy. The book is very good, Jeremy assured me, more or less, crushing me with, unfortunately, it's just too long. Jeremy then filled me in on the economics of the book business and how a book as large as mine would result in a list price that many of the top retailers would refuse to carry. We're probably going to have to cut it significantly. When I hung up, I thought of Sylvester Stallone's assertion back in 1975 that he would rather bury the screenplay to Rocky in the backyard and let the worms play the lead role than give it to James Caan. Damn. I don't think I would have buried it, but I certainly thought I'd prefer to keep it and have it read by no one than have it sold in a bastardized state. Not long thereafter, I received a call from Judith Reagan, and all of a sudden life was good again. We're going to publish it in its entirety, she assured me, and we're going to keep the price down, but I've got to be honest. We're counting on your enthusiasm to help us sell a lot of copies. Well, I certainly was enthusiastic, and the book certainly did sell a lot of copies, a lot more than anyone would have ever guessed. Have a Nice Day hit #1 on the New York Times nonfiction list, and it is still hanging around there after 18 weeks. With the emergence of a book on Charles Schultz and the resurgence of John McCain's book, I have been pushed from #5 to #7, which would be disappointing if I weren't so flattered to be in such great men's literary company. Actually, I'm often humbled when I walk into a bookstore and see my name on the same list as some pretty damn important people. And it's 18 weeks on the New York Times list. Have a Nice Day. I always wanted to call it Blood and Sweatsocks, but I forgot to tell the publisher until it was too late. Has competed and stood side by side with books about Presidents Reagan, Bush, and Clinton, presidential nominees Bush, Bradley, McCain, Forbes, and Trump, First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton, Senator John Glenn, the inventor Galileo, coaching great Vince Lombardi, singing legend Aretha Franklin, wrestling contemporary The Rock, and even the Dalai effing Lama. For all you Buddhists, don't be offended, that's meant as a compliment. In addition to that impressive list, there are two books that I couldn't quite shake. Tis by Frank McCourt and Tuesdays with Maury by Milch Album. Or Album. Tuesdays with Maury was a book responsible for ending my illustrious 1 week run on the top spot of the charts. When that damn Oprah Winfrey's Maury movie aired on television, sales of that book went up 500% and blew mine away. Actually, I'm pretty proud of that fact. How many first time writers can look at themselves in the mirror and honestly say, if only it wasn't for that damn Oprah? I've got to admit I wasn't quite prepared for the stodginess and pretentiousness of the book world. I thought the whole process would be so simple. Wrestling fans buy it, critics review it, the world outside of wrestling learns that the book is far more than just wrestling fans, or for more than just wrestling fans. The entire world is caught up in Foley mania, and I deposit my fat royalty checks and do very little but ride roller coasters and watch Sopranos reruns for the rest of my life. Jennifer Suter, my publicist at Reagan Books, had to break the bad news to me. The critics only review what they want to review, and most of them feel that wrestling is beneath them, she sadly informed me. I was stunned. But it's #1 on the Times list, I whined in a somewhat less than rugged manner. Isn't it their job to review it? I still haven't figured out quite what the hell their job is. Movie critics review all the films. TV critics review all the shows. So why don't book critics review all the books? Don't get me wrong, some of them reviewed the book, but not a whole lot. The ones that did were quite kind. I actually haven't read a negative review yet, and I'm certain that their positive reviews did lead to increased sales upon non-wrestling fans. So for those who cared enough about their job to read a book that was a little out of the ordinary, thank you. For those who couldn't take the time to hop off their high horse to pick it up, they could blow. No, I can't say that. They can kiss. No, that's too crude. They can stick. No, this is all wrong. I'm a best-selling author, damn it. I can't be reduced to hurling guttural insults at my esteemed colleagues in the literary world simply because they didn't deem my life worthy of looking at. As a professional wrestler, there has to be a classier way to make my point, and here it is. For those who make a conscious decision to ignore a lovingly written and extremely entertaining account of a very interesting life spent inside the cultural phenomenon known as professional wrestling, I cordially invite all of you to step forward and collectively apply suction to my genital area. Figuratively speaking, of course. Finally, there's one more thing about the book I'd like to get off my chest. I was given a great piece of advice while working on Have a Nice Day. An autobiography is not the place to settle scores or ruin people's lives, my editor told me while we edited out the parts of the book that did just that. I had actually written quite a few mean things during the course of the book's development, but I had literally thrown out the worst of it and crossed out most of the rest before it even got to the editing. Unfortunately, one completely unnecessary and hurtful dig at my first girlfriend made it into the book, and for that, I'm deeply apologetic. By trying to keep up with my romantic loser image, I trivialized a relationship that was actually very special, if somewhat brief, and by doing so, possibly hurt someone who had always thought highly of me. Hopefully, she still does. I guess while I'm at it, I might as well apologize to Al Snow for all the insensitive comments I made about him throughout the course of the book. Now, on second thought, let me cancel that apology because I'm pretty damn proud of that aspect of the book. As far as I'm concerned, I only wish I could have gotten more jokes in at Al's expense to further expedite my ultimate goal of total and complete Al Snow humiliation and degradation. Writing Have a Nice Day was a tremendous and fulfilling experience, but I sense that its run is just about over. I spoke with my wife about the subject earlier today, and we both agreed that the number of people remaining who have any interest in me is probably dwindling. So here's my dilemma. How do I sell the paperback to a public that has pretty much satiated its hunger for the hardcore legend? Well, to answer your question, I've got two words for you: bonus chapter. That's right, and I hope you appreciate my honesty here. I'm trying to appeal to the exact same people who bought the hardcover. Hey, if they were willing to plunk down $26 the first time around, why not an extra $7.99 for a bonus chapter? Actually, blatant deception and a desire for a bigger bank account is only one reason for the bonus chapter. The other reason is somewhat more noble. As of right now, as my plane is landing in Atlanta on February 24th in the year 2000, I have exactly 3 more days until my 15-year career as an active wrestler comes to an end, and I want to share my thoughts during this critical time with the fans. Unless fate or Vince McMahon intercedes, the final match of my career will be on February 27th, 2000 in Hartford, Connecticut, and a return to the Hell in a Cell. As I look back on a journey that started when I was an 18-year-old kid diving off Danny Zucker's garage, I come face to face with a spectrum of emotions. I'm happy that I will be heading home and spending more time with Colette and the kids. Dewey has assured me that it doesn't matter if I'm on TV anymore because I will always be dad to him, and Noelle has gotten over her initial feeling that if you don't wrestle, we can't eat and we're all going to die. I'm also sad because I realize that a very large and important part of my life is about to be completed. I will certainly miss the roar of the crowd, the feeling of accomplishment after a great match, and the adrenaline rush I've gotten so many times when I'm racing down the road at 2 a.m. in the middle of a 400-mile trip visualizing ways to make America's jaws drop open in unison. Mostly, I'm nervous as hell. I'd actually envisioned something quite different for my bonus chapter, a teaser for my next book. I figured that I would include the first chapter to my surefire bestseller follow up to Have a Nice Day, which I had mentally titled Mondays with Mickey, in response to the World Wrestling Federation's incredibly successful Monday Night Raw is War television show. I certainly felt like I had enough material to work with. Sure, it's only been 15 months since my last book ended with my triumphant kicking of the Rock's candy ass in Worcester, but I still had a wealth of stories left to tell. Have a Nice Day was written entirely from memory. Whatever stories happened to pop into my head at the time made it to the pages. Surely 200,000 words had only served to whet the nation's appetite for Foley. Certainly they were prepared to howl with laughter at the thoughts of Bob Holly giving Al Snow the penis suplex in Montreal. Without a doubt, they would eat up another Foley family vacation to the White Mountains in New Hampshire. And definitely they would sympathize with my realization that after 15 years of blood, sweat, and tears, I pretty much sucked in the ring. Here's the problem. By the time Mondays with Mickey would come out, there would be a glut of wrestling books on the market. I will probably remain the only one actual wrestler author around, but there will be so many damn ghost-written wrestler autobiographies that mine would probably get lost in the shuffle. For crying out loud, I even heard the wit and wisdom of Al Snow is in the works. So instead of adding to the list that would include books by The Rock, China, Bill Goldberg, Diamond Dallas Page, a wrestling cookbook, and an audiobook with the wrestlers reading Greek tragedies, no, I'm not kidding, I thought I'd take the next few days to provide a journal of my thoughts and feelings as my career draws closer and closer to an end. I passed this feeling on to my editor, whose only concerns was, what if they change their minds and you don't lose on the 27th? I assured Jeremy that I had every reason to believe that I would, and that because the Hell in a Cell match in Hartford carries a stipulation that if I lose, I retire, it was a safe bet that I was done. What if you're wrong? Jeremy inquired. I can cover it, I replied. How? His inquiring mind wanted to know. I thought it over before answering. I'll just write February 28, 2000. Whoops, I was wrong. I could see the glistening waters of the Gulf of Mexico welcoming me through the small windows of the plane. Colette will be there to meet me with her beautiful smile, a warm hug, and undoubtedly a handful of problems stemming from our stupid little gym. I haven't been home in 15 days, so I'll probably be busy for a while if you can detect the aroma of my culinary efforts. February 24th, 2000, 3 p.m. Speaking of culinary efforts, I didn't get to experience any at Landry's Seafood House in Pensacola this afternoon. Colette was indeed at the airport, and indeed she did meet me with a beautiful smile, a warm hug, and a handful of problems stemming from our stupid gym. I guess it would be more accurate to call the problems rather than the gym stupid, as the gym itself is actually a great place to work out. After all, isn't that what a gym is for? I swear, when I started going to the gym at age 14, it never occurred to me that there might be a spot on the rug, and if there was, it would never have occurred to me to complain about it. Sometimes the problems can be a little more substantial, as was the case when I was called in at 7 a.m. to talk to one of the members about his dual problems of not bathing and bragging about all the people he had killed in Nam. Mick, please come here, a frightened employee begged me over the phone. Bill is cursing in the free weight area, and 7 members just left. I dutifully drove over and did my best to gently inform Bill that he was single handedly killing my business. After hearing my share of health club woes, I asked Colette if we could keep things a little more positive as we pulled into Landry's. The maitre d' seated my wife as I headed for the men's room. When I emerged from the sanctity of my stall a few minutes later, I was greeted by the smiling faces of two of the restaurant's kitchen workers, each brandishing a pen and paper towel. Mr. Foley, said one in a deep New Orleans accent, we would like your autograph. Now, I'm usually pretty good about autographs, but I definitely felt that this was an unacceptable situation. Were you here waiting for me? I asked with a little anger in my voice. No, sir, he quickly replied, while beaming a golly gee look that made it obvious he didn't feel this bathroom invasion was anything to feel bad about. If you didn't follow me, I began, how come you're standing here with pens and paper in your hands? The New Orleans guy still didn't seem to get it. He was actually beaming as he told me, one of the cooks just told me the man himself just walked in, and I thought I'd get an autograph of the great mankind. Now there was more than just a little anger in my voice mixed with a dab of frustration. This is an invasion of privacy, I informed the clueless guy. You can't stand outside a stall and wait for me to take a shit. I'm sorry, but I can't sign that autograph. If my condemnation had taught him anything, he was doing his best to hide it as he just stood there beaming. His buddy at least showed a little bit of discomfort, even if I never did hear an apology on my way out. As I approached our table, I could see that Colette had ordered a round of soft drinks. Well, this round was going to be on Landry's. Come on, hun, we're going, I said, and when we walked outside, I informed my wife that these people are driving me crazy. Now, if you want to keep alive your image of me as a hell of a guy, please skip the next few paragraphs. But the truth is, I do feel like these people are driving me crazy, and that fact has probably helped influence my decision to retire. Very rarely do I get mad, as I did at the two kitchen workers, but increasingly, it just seems like there's no escape. And it's not just wrestling fans either. More and more frequently, I look at autograph seekers with their, I don't know who you are, but other people do, so I might as well bother you too, look. I can usually detect these guys pretty quickly, and most of them walk away with my special Bill Zimmenhofer signature. 3 years ago, when we decided to move to the Florida Panhandle, my family's privacy wasn't even an issue. Now, with my home being one of the Emerald Coast's tourist attractions, I can practically hear Sylvester Stallone's voice speaking to me in the original Rocky as he tells Bob, the pathetic dock worker who can't make his loan shark payment, you should have planned ahead. Yeah, looking back, I guess I should have, but 3 years ago, wrestling was a passion still somewhat cloaked in embarrassment. If I wanted a retreat, I just had to eat at a nice restaurant. Now, even that's out the window, as doctors and lawyers seem every bit as caught up in our little action-adventure show as the late-night crew at the Waffle House. I often tell Colette that I feel like shaving, cutting my hair, having a little dental work done, getting a new ear, maybe even wearing some decent clothes to fool the public. My loving wife is always kind enough to inform me that people will recognize the way you walk, Mickey. You have a very distinctive walk. Loosely translated, that means you can't hide your ass, Mickey. You have a real big fat ass. I really never thought I'd say this, but in some ways I wish I was Al Snow, where even in his town of Lima, Ohio, no one really gives a rat's ass about him. As for Al, he refuses to acknowledge that my book was good for his career. He plays it off as if I'm just obsessed with making fun of him, but I think deep down he was happy to be mentioned so many times. Al and I even teamed briefly, and our chemistry was so good, outside the ring, inside we sucked, that the UPN network asked for us to co-host its end-of-the-year World Wrestling Federation special. Hell, we even guested together on Loveline, the sexual advice show on MTV. Taking sexual advice from Mick Foley. Wow, there's a scary thought. Alright, hopefully I've gotten the woe is me stuff out of my system. I can just see people labeling me as a hypocrite because I make a very good living due to people's support and then decry that same support. Here's my take on the subject. Buying a Mankind or Cactus Jack shirt is support. Parking on my street and taking a whiz on my lawn is stalking. February 26th, 7 a.m. One more day before the big one. I set my alarm clock for 5 a.m. to be up for a 7 a.m. flight out of Pensacola, but could barely sleep. Maybe a couple of hours, and then I was up and out the door and heading for a World of Wheels auto show in Huntsville, Alabama. I've been regretting my decision to do this show all week, and it will be 1 a.m. by the time I get to my hotel in Hartford for No Way Out. In retrospect, an 18-hour workday that includes 11 hours of travel probably isn't the best way in the world to prepare for one of the biggest matches of my career. I hopped behind the wheel of my car and inserted a tape that was given to me by, of all people, a book critic. The critic, Michael Tierson of Philadelphia, is a big fan of alternative country music no one plays on the radio, and sent me some obscure selections that he thought I'd enjoy. This one was the last music recorded by legendary Texas songwriter Townes Van Zandt before his death in 1997, and I liked it immediately. These tunes put most of what's on today's country stations to shame, but it is highly unlikely they've ever seen the light of broadcast day. As I mentioned earlier, beautiful, haunting songs often spark the creativity in some strange part of my brain, and I immediately began visualizing my Hell in a Cell swan song. I remember getting ready to leave my parents' house for a short 50-minute drive to Nassau Coliseum and realizing I had no music to accompany me. I asked my mom, who replied sadly that all she had was show tunes, which she was pretty sure were not quite my taste. I took a quick look anyway and happily snatched the Mary Poppins soundtrack in front of my mother's astonished eyes. This will be great, I said, as I took off down the porch steps, ready to fast forward through some of the less important numbers to get to one of the favorite tunes. I then proceeded to play Feed the Birds a dozen times in a row as I visualized my bloody triumphs while poor Walt Disney probably rolled over in his grave. February 26th, 9:30 p.m. I'm on the plane in Atlanta, waiting to take off for Hartford. There are several other wrestlers on the plane, as well as a host of young wrestling fans. One youngster asked if The Rock was on the plane, and I replied that he was in the back of the plane in the lavatory and would probably appreciate a knock. Actually, The Rock is not with us on this aircraft. It just seems that I enjoy lying to fans in order to entertain myself. There's nothing like the sight of a group of teenagers hightailing it to the kiddie area of an amusement park because I assured them that Stone Cold was on the little choo-choo. Lying. I love it. So how did I get from winning the belt on December 28th, 1998 to retiring 14 months later? I know I've said I have enough material in these 14 months to write a whole new book, and I do, but I will give just a very brief outline to catch everyone up on what went on. January was a great month of wrestling, topped off by an I Quit match in Anaheim, California. That was both one of the most memorable matches in my career and one of the greatest errors in judgment I've ever made. Certainly, when it comes to parental errors, it's number one on my list. Knowing that I probably wasn't going to leave Anaheim with a belt, I brought Colette and the kids with me so they could see Big Daddy-O in action as the champ. I knew that I was going to take a beating, but Dewey and Noel assured me they would be okay. Besides, I rationalized, seeing your dad beat up is a small price to pay for 4 days at Disneyland. Boy, was I wrong. The match got carried away, and my kids and my wife watched on in horror from the front row as I was handcuffed and bludgeoned with 11 unprotected, full-force chair shots to the head. In a situation that continues to affect me, filmmaker Barry Blaustein was there to record the action for a documentary on wrestling entitled Beyond the Mat. It was a wonderful film, but unfortunately the film clip that is always shown when the movie is talked about is my kids screaming in terror while their dad's skull douses blood on the floor of the Anaheim Arrowhead Pond Arena. February, another good month for Mankind as I win back the belt during halftime of the Super Bowl in late January, defend it in great pay-per-view bout with The Rock in Memphis, and lose it the next night in a tremendous ladder match in Birmingham. Unfortunately, I dislocate my kneecap and tear my medical meniscus of that same knee in the Memphis match, and the injury cuts down the quality of my future matches greatly. March. Leading up to WrestleMania, our industry's biggest showcase, I am no longer the same guy who stole the show for much of the last year. The company urges me to have surgery performed immediately after WrestleMania, but I insist on putting it off until the end of May. What some see as an incredible display of guts, pride, intestinal fortitude is in reality an attempt to push my recovery time into the summer so I can spend a maximum amount of time with my family. I wrestled a 7-foot-tall, 500-pound Big Show at WrestleMania, and I suck. April. I take on Big Show in a boiler room brawl and amazingly have a great match. My last one for a long time. May. More sucking in the ring, but fortunately I'm able to hide this fact with a ridiculous, hokey, but often extremely clever sense of humor that propels my character to its greatest popularity to date. Mr. Sacco is a hero, and luckily I don't have to do much in a match besides pull him out in order to get a response. On May 12th, I begin writing the book that will change my life. June. I write wherever and whenever I can for the entire month. The idea that the book is going to be pretty damn good occurs to me often. July. I finished writing Have a Nice Day while working on a television show called G vs. E. A strange realization occurs to me. My career can now end. I have nothing else to prove. Another realization occurs to me. I'm making more money than I've ever dreamed of. I've got to keep going. In a surprise development, I come back at the end of July to participate in the main event at SummerSlam. Even more surprisingly, I win my third World Wrestling Federation Championship and have my hand raised by special guest referee Jesse Ventura. In something that is a little less surprising, I lose the title the next day. August. I still suck, but no one notices. I hook up with The Rock to form the Rock and Sock connection, possibly the most unique team in wrestling history. This odd couple entertains the fans with its love-hate relationship. Mankind loves The Rock, and The Rock hates him. It is also the only teaming of two future number one best-selling authors in wrestling history. The chemistry and humor of the team takes people's minds off the fact that I'm not nearly the man I used to be. September, see August. October. After 3 months of editing and legal phone calls that boggle my mind, Have a Nice Day is released. I'm very proud of the book and promote it diligently. The book shocks the literary world when it debuts in number 3 on the New York Times list. 2 weeks later, it hits number 1. That is until Oprah. In a tremendous stroke of marketing genius, the book is incorporated into storylines on our television broadcasts. It even leads to a bitter breakup of the Rock and Sock connection when I mistakenly believed that The Rock threw away the autographed copy of the book that I had presented to him. Performance wise, I'm hot and cold as I follow respectable matches with horrible efforts. Luckily, no one notices. November. With the connection broken, Al Snow Weasels is my new buddy. As mentioned earlier, we were able to make the Al Snow jokes part of the storyline, in addition to the real life situation of Al's action figures being yanked out of Walmart across the nation because a couple of professors at Kennesaw State College labeled them as a textbook for spousal abuse. Sadly, I'm having considerable trouble getting around and am embarrassed by one particular match in Philadelphia where I am an obvious, at least to me, detriment to a tag team match. Ironically, Al and I win the tag team belts on this night. After the show, and one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, I meet with Vince and tell him that I think my career needs to end. We settle on the upcoming Survivor Series pay-per-view as my final match. The very next day, Stone Cold Steve Austin's career is put on hold when his long-standing neck condition is judged to be worse than expected. With Steve out, I realize the time is not right to step down and make plans to retire at the December pay-per-view instead. December. With my planned retirement match only a few weeks away, I begin to rethink my career, specifically the way I want to be remembered. I feel like I owe it to myself to go out giving it my best shot, convince Vince that I have another great match left in me. I suggest the chance to wrestle for the belt at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view in Madison Square Garden on January 23rd, 2000 with the return of Cactus Jack. The current champion, Triple H, is both flattered and inspired at the thought of taking part in my last match, and both of us turn our thoughts to tearing down the house at the Garden. For the first time in months, I feel like I have something to prove, and I work my hardest to make the Rumble a classic. When Vince sees the match, the possibility that I'm not quite through presents itself. January. I should have retired at the Garden. January 23rd was easily my best outing in a year and one of my best of all time. Triple H was at his best here, and I wasn't far behind. Well promoted and well developed, the Royal Rumble match is both an artistic and financial success and opens up the possibility of the one thing that's always eluded me, that one huge payoff. I'd come close many times, but there always seemed to be a reason why I was never given credit for big buy rates. In this case, I don't think such a reason exists. February. A few really awkward performances leave me feeling that the Rumble was a fluke and that I should have bowed out at the Garden. 4 prominent wrestlers jumped ship to the World Wrestling Federation from World Championship Wrestling, and I am given on-air credit for bringing them in. Unfortunately, one of them, Eddie Guerrero, dislocates his elbow in the middle of a huge angle and throws the entire future of the No Way Out show in jeopardy. While driving my kids to our house show in New Orleans, Vince calls me on my cellular phone, and we work out a game plan in just a few minutes. I decide to put my career on the line in Hartford if Triple H summons the testicular fortitude to face me inside the cell, which brings me to the present day. I'm thinking about the interview I gave on our Thursday SmackDown show. It was the last chance I had to sell the match, and I really wanted to come up big on it. Upon watching it, I don't think I was completely successful. The art of the promotional interview has changed a lot in the last few years. Fans are so tuned into catchphrases and interaction that I don't believe they have the patience for a heartfelt interview. Today's promos are designed to elicit frequent audience pops, and the art of telling a story that requires listening is rarely attempted. Well, I attempted it, and I was almost successful. As is my style, I didn't rehearse a speech, but instead hoped the words would come to me when I got out there. Many of the words did come, but I yelled a little too much and also belittled the Mankind character in a roundabout way. I stated that when I'm driving down the road late at night, I'm not thinking about making people laugh. I'm thinking about being Cactus Jack. I regret it because it doesn't let the fans know how proud I am of making them laugh as Mankind. Without trying to sound too self-important, it is certainly one of the greatest feelings in the world to have fans tell me that the laughter Mankind gave them helped them through difficult times in their lives. I would like to remember or somehow clear that up before the match tomorrow night. February 27th, 2000, 12:01 a.m. The plane is about to touch down. I hope that sleep will come easily, but I'm not entirely confident of it. I spoke with both my family and one of my best friends about coming to the match in Hartford. My dad will be there, along with my brother, his wife, and their son. We made plans to meet up after the show, and I assured them that I won't be in the same condition I was after the 1998 cell match. I certainly hope not. When I spoke to one of my buddies from home, he informed me that he couldn't get any of the guys interested in going. I won't even try to pretend that this news didn't hurt me. Apparently the feeling was that 3 hours was too far to drive. Considering that we used to drive 6 to sit in the upper deck to see Springsteen, this was hard to take, especially when I remembered that 3 hours hadn't been too far to drive 14 years ago when I was an absolute nobody in his third match in that very same arena. There are many wrestling fans who would give anything to say they were on hand for Mick Foley's last match. Unfortunately, my best friends aren't among them. February 27th, 2000, 1:40 p.m. I've been at the Hartford Civic Center for a little more than an hour now, and I need to write just to take my mind off the big match. I'm faced with a very difficult proposition. How do I live up to the aura of my first Hell in a Cell and write a fitting end to a pretty good 15-year career while taking precautions not to kill myself? Having Triple H as an opponent will help. The guy is truly at the top of his game, and he is arguably the top performer in the business right now. His work is great, he looks like $1,000,000, and he's not afraid to show fear so that his opponent can look good. When Hunter stepped into the top spot several months ago, I honestly doubted that he had strong enough mic skills to carry the ball. I knew his big game matches were among the best in the business, but even as the leader of the phenomenally successful D-Generation X, he had relied more on catchphrases and shock tactics than interviews of any substance. His summer heel turn was muddled and confused, and as part of the overpopulated corporate ministry, Vince, Shane, Undertaker, Hunter, Bradshaw, Farouk, Viscera, Midian, Pete Gas, Joey Abs, Rodney, and Paul Bearer. His reasons for turning bad in the first place were never made clear. With the corporate ministry downsized, Triple H stepped up and became the top heel in the business by attempting what no one had the guts or stability to attempt in years. He actually became a real heel. These days, the cool heel is in. He's a heel in name, but in reality, he wants those cheers. Cheers are nice. Cheers sound good. They are comforting, and everyone falls victim to them. I did when I was a heel, although to a lesser extent than my contemporaries. Hunter went the opposite direction. He got rid of the catchphrases and proved to the world that the art of being a prick was not completely dead, and Hunter is a tremendous artist. 7 months ago, I visualized myself in the main event at both Royal Rumble and No Way Out, but in these visualizations, I saw not Hunter as my opponent, but The Rock, and I, lovable Mick Foley, would be playing the part of the prick. Heading into the summer, The Rock was undeniably on a roll. His audience participation promos were incredibly entertaining, and it didn't take a genius to see that he was the heir apparent to Steve Austin's phenomenally long run as the top guy in the business. But something bothered me about The Rock character. The Rock was mean. Not mean as in kicking ass in the ring, but mean as in picking on and humiliating people weaker than himself. Cameramen, announcers, fans, people like that. Sure, the fans were laughing, but I generally have a pretty good instinct for characters, and all my instincts told me that if Dwayne Johnson didn't show a hint of decency to his character, he would experience a major drop-off eventually. I called Vince and told him how I felt, and a few days later, I asked to speak to The Rock alone in the dressing room. I actually had goosebumps as I told him that in a year's time, the World Wrestling Federation might very well be looking at a roster that would be void of Austin, Undertaker, and me, and that it would be up to him to carry the ball by himself. Remember, this is before Hunter shot into the stratosphere. I then offered my opinion about injecting a little humility into his ultra-cool persona. The Rock listened intently, and while rubbing his chin, he said what would later become his lone off-camera cliche. Let me think about it. A few days later, I bounced a plan off Vince and The Rock. What if The Rock teamed with Mankind, I began. With our history together, people will eat it up. I could see Vince and The Rock mulling over the possibilities. At the beginning, Rock can't stand me, I continued. But little by little, Mankind starts to grow on the guy, and The Rock grudgingly accepts him. Maybe even likes him. The moment he accepts him, I turn on him, and as Cactus Jack, I become a more vicious heel than the fans ever dreamed of. The plan made perfect sense. The Rock and I had undeniable chemistry in the ring, and we both genuinely liked each other. Vince was impressed, but The Rock, who was actually a very astute student of the game, had a valid question. Why would Mankind turn on The Rock? I'll think of something, I said, but in reality, I already had. When I returned home, I called Barry Blostein, the director of the aforementioned wrestling documentary Beyond the Mat. Barry is a very successful screenwriter in Hollywood who has been responsible for some major screenplays, including The Nutty Professor and Coming to America. As a favor from Universal, he was given a huge small budget to pursue his dream of directing a documentary on professional wrestling. When I met Barry 5 years ago, I was actually slotted to be featured as a veteran slugging it out on the independent circuit instead of a sock-wearing, ravioli-pushing, best-selling writer son of a bitch. Over the course of these years, Barry has become a close friend, and despite the fact that the World Wrestling Federation has chosen not to promote the film, I am damn proud to be in it. For the record, the Royal Rumble scenario of me being bludgeoned in front of my family was not staged for Barry's movie. I had plans to bring them to California for the Rumble ever since winning the title 26 days earlier, long before I knew of Barry's film crew being present. Unfortunately, the agreed-upon number of 5 shots to the head somehow became 11 in the heat of battle, and my kid's reaction was more horrible and gut-wrenchingly painful to watch than I could ever have imagined. As a parent, I accept full responsibility for the mistake. While at the Rumble in Anaheim, Barry's camera had stayed on me pretty much the whole day. I was almost certain that the camera had been on me without pause from the moment I left the ring until the moment I left the building, about a 90-minute span of time. I was also fairly certain that amid all the people who were with me during that time, my family, World Wrestling Federation camera people, production people, doctors, a plastic surgeon, etc., one very important person was conspicuous in his absence. Barry, I asked, during the entire time you guys filmed me after the Rumble, do you remember seeing The Rock? Barry thought it over before replying, yes, you guys talked about before you left the building. But not until then, I inquired. Not the whole time I was being stitched? I don't think so, Barry replied, but I'll check. The next day, Barry called my house. Mick, I checked all the footage we shot, he said. And what did you find out? I asked. Barry's next words confirmed what I'd suspected and gave me that all important reason for my heel turn. He never checked on you. Unfortunately, the turn never happened. As I mentioned earlier, we did form the Rock and Sock connection, and together we created some very memorable and humorous television moments, and the partnership further elevated both of our careers. There was only one problem. The Rock never really did accept Mankind, let alone grudgingly grow to like him. To the contrary, he seemed to hate the poor guy more by the week. After 2 months of absolutely not giving in, I told the office that I couldn't do the turn because his character refused to budge. A few days later, I told The Rock the same thing at our October pay-per-view in Cleveland. He took it amazingly well. The Rock and Sock connection split up on Raw the next evening when I found The Rock's autographed copy of Have a Nice Day in the garbage and responded with a scathing, uncharacteristically unlovable indictment of The Rock, which included calling him a self-centered prima donna son of a bitch. A few months later, we teamed up again, and I suggested the Mankind turn, this time leading to a Royal Rumble showdown at Madison Square Garden. When word got to The Rock that my turn was inspired by the Beyond the Mat footage, he was very uncomfortable about it, and also maintained that he was almost certain that he had come to check on my well-being immediately after the match. I told him that visual evidence disagreed with him. He then sincerely apologized, but we both went to Vince and told him it would be better not to have us wrestle each other. Later that evening, Vince, who I had spoken to earlier about a Triple H Cactus retirement match at the Rumble, told me he would like to see me and Hunter at the Rumble, but not in a match where my career was on the line. A few years ago, I had no idea what I wanted to do after wrestling. Fortunately, Have a Nice Day has opened up a lot of doors for me. I wrote a Christmas story that I'm calling Mick Foley's Christmas Chaos, the moral of which was inspired by a great little kid I met named Antonio. He was a 4-year-old boy who had been very badly burned. Despite his heavy scars, his most pronounced feature was his wonderful smile and the marvelous little personality that came with it. I enjoyed writing the story a great deal and plan to write a series of children's books. It's 15 minutes before the crowd comes in. I need to walk around the ring. February 27th, 2000, 8:32 p.m. I believe I'm ready. I haven't trained for this one like I did for the Rumble, but I feel pretty good. In a few minutes, I will begin preparing, mentally and physically, for what I really hope will be the last match of my career. But before I go, I'd like to say that I've had the time of my life, and I never felt this way before. Yes, I swear, it's the truth, and I owe it all to you. Yes, I did it! Woo! Even with the guts of my career moments away, I had the guts, pride, and testicular fortitude to quote a song from the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. I must be really secure with my manhood. Actually, with all the kidding aside, I do have a song that I really believe speaks for me when I try to sum up my character. The Hard Way Every Time. It was written by one of my childhood heroes, Jim Croce, who died in a plane crash when I was 7. It was never a hit song, or to the best of my knowledge, ever released on a single, but over the past 15 years, it has never failed to put a chill down my spine. I was fortunate to be able to meet Jim's widow, Ingrid, at the restaurant she owns and operates in San Diego. I told her my fondness for the song and of my long-time ambition to have a music video of my career done to it. I remember Diamond Dallas Page's reaction when I played him the song and told him of my video ambition in 1992. Bro, if they do that, DDP said, you'll be the biggest babyface on the planet. Ingrid's words were even nicer. Jim will like that, she said. Jim will really like that. Thanks for everything, but I've got to go. I've got a job to do. April 19th, 2000, 4:25 a.m. Oops, I was wrong. Guess who had another match? That's right, 4 weeks after swearing that I wouldn't come back, I came back. And what was billed as for one night only, I took part in a fatal 4-way elimination match in the main event of WrestleMania. The one dream that had always eluded me. Actually, that dream was more or less a fictional creation that I spoke about in order to get more heat on Hunter when he became the guy who deprived Mick Foley of his last dream. In reality, my dream had been to retire with honor and dignity. So, in a great moment of irony at WrestleMania 16, attaining my fictional dream pretty much crushed my real dream. Luckily for me, our fans already expect us to be a bunch of lying hypocrites, so there was no major backlash when I returned. Actually, the response I was given when I came back was among the loudest of my career. Even the mention of a haircut received a prolonged ovation. In truth, not everyone forgave me. A small but very vocal minority really felt like I had ruined my career and tarnished my legacy by coming back so soon. The criticism of these fans really stung me, because these were the same type of hardcore fans who had supported me in my early years. But their instant exodus of support for me and condemnation of me without bothering to learn the circumstances surrounding my decision made one thing very clear. I needed to do what was best for my family, for myself, and for the World Wrestling Federation. Besides, the guys complaining that most would have had trouble saying no to Vince if he asked them to cut his lawn, let alone the main event in the biggest match in wrestling history. The match itself was pretty good, considering that up until a day before the show, I was mired down in my biggest depression since I'd lost my effing ear in Germany. Even better, considering that I called my wife an hour before the show and told her, "Don't be surprised if the match sucks, and I don't sell a lot." Due to a philosophical difference I was having with one of the match's participants. Somewhere around the 20-minute mark, I climbed to the second turnbuckle with The Rock lying prone on the Spanish announcer's table some 10 feet away. Man, he looked far away, but then again, so had Rick Fargo at my World Championship Wrestling tryout in 1989, and I'd nailed that one, hadn't I? I took to the air. I was 23 back in 1989. I was 34 at WrestleMania 16. And apparently, during those 11 years, Mother Nature and Father Time had teamed up to kick my ass. I didn't nail the elbow this time. In fact, the only nailing was my sternum on the unforgiving table. I lay on the floor, which was neither cold nor concrete, but warm and padded, and clutched my sternum. I tried to get some air, but it hurt to breathe. Referee Earl Hebner asked if I was okay, but I could only moan. Then panic set in. I had a thought, and it scared me. I can't continue. No, that wasn't it. Oh God, I just blew my big spot at WrestleMania. No, that's not it either. Here it is, and I swear this is the truth. Oh no, I'm not going to make it to Disneyland tomorrow. Honestly, despite the fact that I'd just blown my biggest move in the biggest match on the biggest card in World Wrestling Federation history, my priorities were firmly in place. I did the finish as plotted, and I was actually ecstatic when I was through. I was retired. For real this time. Or at least as real as one can be in the world of wrestling. And my family was with me. Dewey sat on my lap during the WrestleMania post-game show, and I gave one of my favorite interviews. I don't know exactly what I said, but I had my little buddy on my lap, and I was happy as hell. I didn't attend the traditional WrestleMania party, but instead went back to my hotel and tried to rest as my melting ice pack dripped down both sides of my ribs. I barely slept at all. The next morning, I woke Colette and the kids, and we headed down the elevator and out the door to greet the first rays of morning. Out of nowhere, a microphone was thrust in front of me. I saw the man's arm and then his face, which glared intently at me. I could see sleeping bags to my right and empty coffee cups to my left. Obviously, this crew had been lying in wait the entire night in order to scoop the first post-career interview with the hardcore legend. He began to speak. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath and could detect a sneer in his lip as he began his verbal assault. "Mick Foley," he snorted. "You showed up at WrestleMania fat and out of shape. You threw away your honor and your dignity. You prostituted your name and you crapped on your legacy. You lied to the fans and you disrespected your memory. You sold out everything you believed for one last payoff. What are you going to do now?" My answer was simple. I'm going to Disneyland.